But as we went to log in about 2 minutes ago, the internet went off in our office. So I literally just ran home through the rain. So I apologize. I'm coming live from my home office. It looks like we got it restored because everybody is back on at Landmark, which is great. So we'll get started in just about 1 minute. And when we get started, I'm gonna turn things over to Lisa Pellrine in just a moment. Um, and Lisa, we can begin whenever you want. I'm going to go ahead and start getting my screen shared and all those things. And
Great.
Lisa, whenever you're ready, you
Thank
tell
you.
us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Pellerin. I'm the Director of Enrollment here at Landmark School. I know many of you, and it's nice to see some new faces as well. We appreciate you taking the time during your lunch break to join us for this presentation. Josh is going to kind of work us through kind of the Landmark Learning Model and our programs, and then there's going to be an opportunity for a Q&A. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to start putting them into the chat. And then Josh, Susan, and I will manage those and get all your questions answered. So again, thanks for being here, and I'll turn things over to Josh.
Thank you. And again, thanks everybody so much for being here. A couple quick housekeeping things. If you're not muted, if you don't mind muting, we love having the Zoom format because we get to see everybody and it's a little bit easier for us to be with each other and feels a little bit more intimate. But if you don't mind muting, that way we make sure that we don't accidentally interrupt one another. And with that too, again, I apologize since I am home. My dogs will inevitably start barking any moment now. So I apologize for any of that background noise, but we're so appreciative of you taking the time and joining us. And I know many of you on this call are very familiar with Landmarks. Some of you are less familiar. So what we wanted to do today, as Lisa said, really just try to give you an overview, certainly for those that might be new to Landmark, share a little bit more about our program, who we are, what we do, and those for you that are more familiar, just kind of walk you through a little bit more about what's been on our mind. What are we thinking about? What are we spending our time trying to do for our students, both now and into the future? So with that, hopefully you could see my screen, right? And the name of the presentation is Designed to Thrive. And what we want to walk you through is the architecture of learning, living, and thriving at Landmark School. So I'm just going to jump right into it. So to give you an idea of today's design brief, right? Why we're all here, what are we trying to accomplish? So we want to begin by talking a little bit more again about our community, about what you should know about Landmark from kind of a high overview, and then what also drives us? What are our underlying kind of core principles that drive what we believe and the decisions that we make? And then we also want to talk a little bit about, based on that, how are we thinking about what it means to prepare dyslexic kids, and I would argue all kids in that, for that matter, for a really complicated, ever-changing, ever uncertain future, right? What does that look like? What does that mean? And then I'm gonna spend a couple minutes. I'd love to do a little day in the life and walk you through what it looks like to be at Landmark for our students. And then at the end, just do a couple quick profiles of some of our Landmark graduates and where they are in the world and what they're doing today. So I'll just jump right into it. And again, as Lisa said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We very much want this to be a conversation, right? Not just a formal presentation. So, like I mentioned, Landmark by Design, our community and our beliefs. What drives us, right? What do we look like and what drives us? So first, as many of you know, we're approximately 500 students sitting on two campuses. Our high school campus is about 2.5 miles down the road from our elementary middle school campus. High school in Beverly, Massachusetts, and then again, 2.5 miles down the road, technically in Manchester by the Sea, is our elementary and middle school campus. We have approximately 200 students at our elementary and middle school, which is actually an increase. A lot of you may not be familiar with that. We were able to do new additions on both campuses, which I'll speak to a little bit in a moment. And as part of the addition at the elementary middle school, we were actually able to expand so that we could serve more students, which we're really excited about. And then at our high school campus, we have approximately 300 students fully enrolled. Of those 300 students, approximately, I think it's actually 126 this year, are boarding students. They come to us from 19 different states and 7 different countries. As far as our kind of class profile for that graduating class, which again we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, 100% of our students are accepted into colleges and universities, and 94% of them choose to enroll. The tenure, kind of the lifespan of a Landmark student varies, right? The vast majority of our students that graduate from Landmark School, over 50%, actually started with us in elementary, middle school. And then a large portion often will join us in ninth grade. And then we also have 10th graders and even 11th graders that join us as well. So it's this interesting mix, but we often have an arc of students staying with us for several years, which we love and are certainly proud of being able to serve them through that. So, give it again quick profile of our student, right? And by profile, I'll get more into kind of the diagnostic information in a moment. But who are our students? Who do we best serve? Well, we best serve creative, capable, and curious students, right? So we are serving students who have often had a negative school experience before they get to us, have often been put in an environment that didn't understand them and that wasn't built for them. And so they often didn't find the success that they are capable of. And that's the student we often serve best, right? That student that has all this potential, and it's just a matter of someone designing a program for them by understanding who they are and what they need. We also, serve grounded, growing, and game students, and by that I mean our students have strong social skills. They have strong and intact social emotional resilience within the spectrum of all students today, right? I think we can all agree as we navigate our world today, students present differently all across the board, right? So, but in general, right, our students are really well grounded socially, socially, emotionally, right? They're growing and they're game for it, right? We want to work with students who come to us and say, okay, I may not trust you yet. I might have a lot of skepticism about this thing because of what I've been through, right? But we want to be able to partner with them to show, hey, you can do this, right? We're going to hold you to high standards, but we're going to do so through high support, right? And we want a student who is game for that. And then, of course, we want them to be eager, engaged, and exploratory, right? We want students who ask lots of questions. We want students who will challenge us in really appropriate ways, right? To say, well, okay, why am I doing this? Or what does that mean? We love students that help us draw direct connections between the skills that we're trying to build and what's meaningful and important to them, right? That's the kind of profile of student that we're working with. And again, I know you all are all familiar with that. And so, what it may look like, all of our students have a language-based learning difference of some variety, the vast majority being dyslexia. And so, what it can look like is a diagnosis of dyslexia, a disorder of written language, expressive language disorder, executive function deficits, ADHD, and then certainly some processing deficits as compared to other components of their profile, right? Again, you guys are all super familiar with this already. Again, almost all of our students have a diagnosis of a specific learning disability, the vast majority being dyslexia. But as we all know and we can appreciate, right, dyslexia means more like this, right? There are a variety of ways that it can express themselves through executive function, through written expression, and other things. And again, we feel very well equipped to serve and to support those students. So back to this idea of our design principle. I mentioned that we want to talk about our community, right, in that broad swath of giving an idea of who we are. But what's our founding principle, right? What is it that we believe and that drives our decisions and everything we do on a day-to-day basis? And that's this idea that dyslexic students deserve an education as remarkable as their thinking, right? We don't exist in order to accommodate students. We don't exist to modify for students. We exist to design for students in the way that they think because we know they are capable. We know they have incredible potential, and we want to make sure that they get the education that they deserve, and that education in all of its complexity and all of its richness matches, right, that same cognitive ability and their unique problem solving and their ability to see the world through a different lens. We want to make sure that we are matching that right along the way. And again, I know most of you are already familiar with that, right? So I want to talk a little bit. What does that look like, right? What does that mean, right? If that's what we do, and that's what we believe, and that's who we serve, what might that look like? Well, we're having all kinds of conversations right now and asking ourselves all kinds of really, I think, interesting questions, not only about how do we continue to serve students as we have for the last, 50 plus years, right? And make sure that we are preserving the remarkable experiences and results that we've been able to grant them. And how do we also make sure that we are preparing them for a world that looks very different than it did when Landmark was founded in 1971? And in many ways, a world that looks different than it did 5 years ago, right? And a world that we know is going to look even more different 5 years from now. So we're talking a lot about what does it mean to prepare students for the future, right? And again, this isn't a Landmark thing. This isn't a dyslexia thing. I think anybody on this call that has anything to do with schools right now is asking a very similar question, right? Trying to understand what does this look like? What does this mean? This is from the Futures platform. This is just kind of a way of thinking about how do we think about what the future could be, right? What are we preparing students for? So this is again just kind of a framework that really talks about, all right, what do we know about the past, right? What do we know exists? What do we know right now? What are signals and trends that we are clear and present right now that we need to consider? And then what kind of future do we actually want to have for our kids, right? What do we want to build for them? So again, just to kind of ground us a little bit in how we think about these kinds of conversations. And what I wanted to share was this. This is from Thomas Friedman. Many of us might be familiar with Thomas Friedman. He's a New York Times columnist. He's also an author. He wrote a series of books. This one, I think, is like from 2003. It's called "Thank You for Being Late," if I remember correctly. And he put together, this particular image really resonates me, right? So this is not scientifically based. This is a framework that he developed. And what you could see there, obviously, is we're looking at the rate of change, right? We're looking at the rate of change as it relates to time. And then that blue line is technology. It's this hockey stick, right? Of just rapid changes in technology. And then that green line is human adaptability, right? That's our ability as human beings to be able to cope with a change. And what he suggests, right, is that we're actually here, right? So we are well past the line of adaptability, right? That we live in a world, again, this is from like 2003. We live in a world that is changing and evolving so much faster than we can possibly process or understand it. Again, I don't know if that resonates with you. It certainly does with me, both in education and outside, just on a daily basis, just this inundation, right? Of complexity. And I think about that a lot and think about what do we do for our kids to prepare them to inherit this level of complexity? What does this look like? And to give you a small example, again, this is now just me, but I took that same framework and you could do all kinds of things with this. But I think about over time how much education has changed, right? And how much what it means to prepare a student for the world has changed. And so if you look down there at the bottom right, it used to be that the appropriate education was really more just about physical safety and well-being. And then we wanted to give you kind of a basic understanding of how the world worked, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then it's evolved and we want to make sure that we're building a civil society. And then, what we really want to do is make sure that kids are prepared for college. And then as part of that, they need to have technology proficiency and on and on and on, right? And so as we think about what it means to prepare our kids for the world, again, dyslexic or not, I think we have reached a point where there is so much that we as schools have to constantly reflect and have these conversations with ourselves about what are the skills, what are the values, what is the Teflon that we need to give our kids in order to be able to meet this level of complexity. And a lot of it we already know. A lot of it is doing the same that we've always done. And some of it is reflecting on how do we make that as relevant and as important as it's always been for our students, knowing the world that they live in. I just find this interesting. This is from OCD, which does the PISA exam. I had the great fortune a couple summers ago of getting to meet the individual, Andreas, who is in charge of PISA exam, which many of you will be familiar with. It is kind of that global exam that we give. I think it's every 4 years, where we're able to compare like reading in Japan versus the US, right? How is Estonia doing in math compared to Argentina, right? It's that global review. And one of the things that the PISA exam and what Andreas is talking a lot about in the brave new world that we are entering, that we are finding that the things that are easiest to teach are also the things that are easiest to automate, right? So when we think about how we evaluate our students, you think about the kind of skills that are very kind of seeped in tradition in some schools, that these are also the things that AI can just do effortlessly, right? What does that mean as we prepare kids for the workforce? What does that mean as we want to make sure that they are distinct and have a skill set, right, that's going to make them successful beyond our walls? Because ultimately, that's what's most important. And again, I find that super interesting. This is also along the same lines. This is from Made by Dyslexia, which is a group out of the UK that I do a lot of work with. They're a global non-for-profit that is dedicated to changing the world's perception of dyslexia from a disability into a valued difference. And so they're looking a lot at dyslexia and neurodiversity as it relates to the workforce specifically. And there's all kinds of rabbit holes I could go down with that. They've partnered with LinkedIn and others and Microsoft. But one of the things they're talking a lot about is that often the skill set, some of those softer skills that are often associated with individuals with dyslexia, and by that I mean individuals with dyslexia often kind of self-identify in these areas. There are also the things that when we think about the convergence of AI and the workforce, it's these softer skills that more and more we're seeing from corporations that they're saying this is what's going to be most important now and into the future. And it's also fascinatingly this overlay often with what we see as a lot of the strengths associated with individuals with dyslexia. So, with that said, right, we're having all kinds of conversations about how do we ensure as a school that we are helping our students with their difficulties. How do we make sure that we are building up those deficits that they come to us with, that we're building up those skills, and we're doing so in a way that's not at the cost of investing in their strengths, right? How do we actually leverage their strengths to help build up their struggles, right? And that's always been what Landmark's about. And we're now having more intentional conversations about what does that look like in today's world? What does it look like to tell a kid, I need you to work really, really hard on this essay that is harder for you to complete than a lot of your peers, right, who may not be dyslexic, and that I know for a fact you could have AI write for you in 3 seconds or less, right? How do we have those conversations? How do we ensure that we continue to make learning meaningful and direct and giving our kids agency, right, in that value proposition of school and this, kind of crazy world that we're living in? And we have found that by doing a lot of what we've always done, right? It's about doing and investing in what's always made Landmark so unique in this kind of focus on skill building, right? And then how do we just ensure that that skill building is within the context and within what makes sense today? So here's kind of our driving question, right? What does it mean to prepare students? And I have with dyslexia in parentheses because that's super important to Landmark, but I would argue every school in America should be asking themselves this question right now. What does it mean to prepare students with dyslexia for a complicated future where the only certainty is further complexity, right? And then that sounds smart. But essentially, what it means is like, how do we do this, right? How do we prepare kids knowing that they're going to inherit a world that's different than the ones that we certainly first came into? And we think we can do this by rejecting an either or paradigm. And many of you might be familiar with this. By either or, I mean this pervasive narrative that I have never agreed with that suggests that our kids have to choose one or the other, that our families have to choose one or the other. You can get the support that you need, or you can have a meaningful, engaging college prep experience. You can have an educational experience that's built for you, right? Or, right, you can have rigor and high standards, right? We can give you the support that you deserve, or, right, we can give you a curriculum that's going to prepare you to go, to the college of your dreams, right? So we are rejecting this either or philosophy, and we're talking a lot about all and. We want to continue to give our kids all and. In a world of this level of complexity, it's not about choosing either or, it's about making sure they have all that they need and that we're giving it to them on a daily basis, in and out, in all that we do. And we're talking about this through the Landmark Learning Model. This is not new. For many of you that know Landmark well, none of this is new. The way that we're talking about it, the intentionality of our language, that's new, right? Because we're trying to, in this complex world, how do we make our story more clear and more exacting for folks? And that's what we're talking about with the Landmark Learning Model. The Landmark Learning Model is the ecosystem in which our kids exist. It's what we give to them every day, all day, and every single class. And I'll walk you through it just a little bit. But what you can see there in the center, right, is this idea of all and. And that is kind of the core principles of our instructional model. It's always been the core principles of our instructional model since 1971. And that's the idea that we want to make sure that we give structured, explicit, scaffolded, individualized, and meaningful instruction for our kids. That's always been the case. It will always be the case. And the way that we do that, the kind of the ingredients that we use at Landmark School, I'll walk you through right now. Before I do, I also should point out that the kind of the swirl at the outer rings of this image, that's our portrait of a graduate. So those are the things that we as a school a few years ago came together and said, of course, we want to make the best writers possible. Of course, we want to have the best readers possible. But in service of what? That's not an end goal. That's a means to an end goal. And that's our portrait of our graduate. And so there's more about that on our website. But the idea is that we want to make sure that we're developing self-aware self-advocates, that we are building a fluency in literacy and communication across the board, right? Certainly print literacy, but also technological literacy. Also, in this crazy world, AI literacy, right? All the different ways that our kids need to understand and be able to communicate in the world that is today. We want to make sure that they're good, unique problem solvers and that they have the perseverance to do so. And of course, we want to make sure that they're empathetic and that they have perspectives beyond just their own experiences, right? Because that's what our world calls for today. So with that said, again, I'm going to walk you through some of these ingredients. Again, none of which are new. We're just talking a little bit more explicitly about. The first is language-based learning. That's what Landmark is all about. And by language-based learning, I mean every teacher is a language teacher. That's one of the most powerful aspects of Landmark School, in my opinion, that whether or not you're in science class or you're in language arts or you're in PE, your teacher has the same level of training, has the same language that they are using, and are reinforcing similar strategies that we know are designed for the way our kids work, right? So that's what we mean by every teacher is a language teacher. And that's this, again, this idea of language-based learning. It's what we immerse our kids in every day, all day at Landmark School. It integrates listening, speaking, reading, and writing into every lesson and every class every day. Again, we don't have writing classes or reading classes or science classes. We structure them in terms of their day and the way that we call them and title them. But in reality, all of those things all day, every day, in every class are being reinforced and brought to each other through the expertise of our faculty, right? That's what we really heavily invest in, is making sure that we have faculty that speak the same language, that have the same knowledge set, and can support students across their day and across their experience. We also have what Landmark has been known for since 1971, which is our 6 teaching principles, right? Those are the things that guide our instructional practices. I refer to them as the science of reading meets the art of teaching, right? We obviously, Landmark, like many schools like it, was implementing the science of reading and structured literacy long before we really had the kind of clinical or research basis for that, right? It's just what we knew to be appropriate and correct based on our own experiences. And now the rest of the world has certainly caught up with that, but it's not only knowing what to do, it's how you do it. And that's what our 6 teaching principles are all about, making sure that we are, again, in every class and every day, using the best instructional practices, those high leverage instructional practices that we know help create order in reasoning for our kids, right? So it's research-based strategies that make learning accessible. Ultimately, that is what we want to do. And then we also, in with this, right, in recognizing the complexity of our world, recognizing that the world that we're preparing our kids for doesn't require a yes or no answer. It requires a problem to be solved and understood and communicated and all of these things. We also want to make sure that we are exposing our kids to inquiry and problem solving. So we are talking more, this has always been a part of Landmark, but we are talking more about how do we put authentic questions in front of our kids? How do we make a direct connections between the skills that we are building and their application in the real world? We do that for a number of reasons, right? A, because we really again want to bridge that gap that it's not just skill building, it's the application of the skill that ultimately matters, right? We want to make sure we're giving those experiences to our kids, and we also for their own engagement and agency, we want to make sure that we are helping them draw that direct line, right? So we're not just doing algebraic equations, we're doing algebraic equations in pursuit of building a more sustainable bridge, right? As a small example. What we're also trying to do with this, and what's really important to me and that we've talked a lot about, is we know students with LBLD and dyslexia need structure. But I actually challenge that a little bit. What students with dyslexia and executive function challenges need is the ability to create structure in unstructured environments. We want to build them to a level of independence where they take all the skills, they take all the strategies, their gift, they have all the tools that we're giving to them, and they make independent choices about how to deploy them. And we don't want the first day of college to be the first day that they have that experience. We want to make sure that throughout their time at Landmark, we are giving them those opportunities to create structure and that we're there, as appropriate to swoop in. I talk a lot about our kids' safety net, right? And we give our kids a safety net. Every kid should have a safety net, right? Regardless of dyslexia or not. But we also have the unique ability at Landmark to raise and lower that safety net. Not just year to year, not just from sophomore year to junior year, but from third period to fourth period, right? Depending on the child's skill set, depending on the demands. How do we raise and lower that safety net? Again, so we're giving kids the opportunity to apply all that we're giving them, not just receive all that we're giving them. We want them to be the drivers of their education. We want them to have agency so that when they leave us, right, they can deploy the tools and the strategies that we spend so much time building in them, and that we have the confidence that they know how to do that. So again, that's the Landmark learning model. It's not new. That's been Landmark's history for years and for decades. But we are trying to talk about it a little bit differently, a little bit more directly. And again, in the noise of how we live today and all the craziness of our world, we also want to make sure that distinction is clear. And for me, what I come back to all again and again is it's all and, right? Too often we give kids this false dichotomy that you can either have one or the other because you're dyslexic. And in reality, that's never been true. And it's certainly not true at Landmark because you need everything. You need all of those things in order to be successful. So another thing we've been talking a lot about that I just thought this group would find interesting, if it's not on your radar yet, I highly encourage you. And that's the book 10 to 25 by David Yeager. His book came out about a year ago, maybe a little bit more. He's now on the circuit. He's at lots of different conferences. So again, you might have seen him. If you haven't, I highly recommend picking up the book 10 to 25. It's all about the science of motivating young people. And in young people, as he defines, from really kind of early adolescence, pre-adolescence, 10 years old, to kind of early adulthood, 25. And as we all know, with some of our friends with ADHD, that 25, right, might even be more like 26, 27, developmentally. But what he talks about is that we're getting it all wrong. Right? That this idea that our kids make the decisions that they make because they have a poorly developed frontal lobe. And he brings all kinds of research to bear to suggest that that's not true. That's not the motivation or the why young people make the decisions that they make. Instead, and I won't go into all this, again, you should read the book, it's really interesting, but he kind of makes this case that in terms of our own biology and evolutionary design, that from an early stage of human history, right, there was no adolescence. There was this, no idea of like coming into your own. And instead, around the age of 10, you lived in a group and you had to prove your value to that group. Because if that group did not see you as valuable and able to make a contribution, that group would not allow you to stay with them, which threatened your survival, right? So he talks about what young people are actually motivated by, is wanting to be able to garner respect, wanting to being able to contribute, right? Wanting to be seen as a member of their community. So he talks about this in terms of mindsets, and this is what I find super fascinating. He talks about the enforcer mindset, and that's this idea of you do what you do, you're going to do what I say because I said it because I'm in charge, right? Really rigid expectations, lots of rules, lots of clear cut punishments, very punitive, not a lot of support, because that's not the goal. The goal is perpetuating authority. I think we can all resonate. We had a teacher in our lives that probably felt that way. We might know some schools that are a little bit more built that way. And on the other extreme is the protector mindset, and that's this idea that our kids aren't capable, right? That we need to save them, and this I think is something we're really susceptible to as educators of students with dyslexia. I'm a parent of two kids with dyslexia, right? And often they've had really traumatic school experiences, so we see our job as protecting them from that, and we certainly need to protect them from traumatic experiences, but we don't need to protect them from opportunities to build resilience. And unfortunately, that's what the protector mindset does, right? It lowers expectations, right? By saying, don't worry, you don't have to work that hard, or, I expect this for most kids, but for you, I'm going to expect, this instead. It's about helping them avoid challenges or things that might be difficult for them. It's giving them too much help, and it's an excess of praise, right? And I think, again, in LD schools, this is where we have to watch ourselves because we could easily be susceptible to this. And in either case, whether it's the enforcer mindset or the protector mindset, what happens is we inadvertently are telling kids a story that they're not capable, right? Either by not giving them the opportunity for the enforcer mindset, or by saying, oh, don't worry about it, buddy, right? E for effort, right? We're going to give you, your A is going to be based on showing up and, the fact that you did your absolute best, right? Knowing that their absolute best, right, could be more. Right, those are the protector that we through that protector and enforcer mindset, we end up telling a story that enables our kids. And what we want to do is empower our kids, and that's the mentor mindset. That's this idea that we're going to have high standards and high support. Right? Just because you have dyslexia and because you've had difficult school experiences, I'm going to see that. I'm going to recognize that. I'm going to be here with you in that. And guess what? You can do this. And so we're going to together make this happen. But I'm not going to do for you what you can do for yourself, right? Because that's not what this is all about. That's not actually helping you grow. Small example, and I promise I'll move on from this because clearly I'm just super excited. I find it fascinating. They did a study where they gave, I believe it was late high school students, a written assignment. Gave them a written assignment. They had two groups. The only variable between the two groups is that when they returned it, everyone had written feedback. One group on their written feedback at the top said something to the degree of, I know you can do better. They then gave everybody the opportunity to voluntarily redo the work for a higher grade. The individuals that got the note that was as simple as, I know you can do better, not only did they have a higher rate of taking advantage of redoing the essay, their improvements were far and above that of those who didn't get the note, right? So again, it's just really interesting to think about the stories that we're telling kids and the support that we are giving them, and how do we do so in a way that empowers them, not necessarily just helps them. So again, for us, that means that in every class, with every teacher, every day, right, we're doing this. They're immersed in the landmark learning model. They're immersed in our ecosystem. And that's where I want to walk you through a little bit of what that actually looks like on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to walk you through a student portrait, right? A day in the life. So this is Julia. Julia is a senior here at Landmark. Julia started in, I think, third grade at Landmark. When Julia first came to Landmark, she couldn't read. She was incredibly hesitant to talk. And again, we all know this story. We're all very familiar with it. We sit here today, and this is Julia's schedule as a senior. And what you'll notice here, if you're familiar with Landmark, you'll notice a difference. If you're not, we have what we call a blue and gold schedule. So we have 8 classes over 2 days, and that's new this year by design. What we wanted to do is do a couple of things. One is have some extended learning blocks. So we wanted to ensure that we were giving our kids time to have direct instruction, scaffolded practice, and then supervised application, right? So that we could have that as a diagnostic moment for ourselves to understand, okay, yeah, they're applying this independently, or no, they're not, or whatever the case may be, right? We also recognize that we were sending our kids inadvertently a little bit through a rat race, right? 7 classes a day, 45 minutes each on a campus in our high school that's close to 30 acres is a lot. It's a whole lot. It also looks nothing like the real world. It looks nothing like college. So what we wanted to do was create this experience for our kids that, again, reflected a little bit more of what life is going to look like, and then give them the support in order to do that. I will also say, sometimes we have concerns about students with ADHD and dyslexia, and can they handle a block schedule? And I always say, as somebody with ADHD and dyslexia, and as kids with it, don't ever tell me what my kids can't handle, right? It's not about whether they can handle it. It's about the support that we give to help them meet those expectations, right? And that, for us, has been going really, really well as we introduce this schedule this year. And I'll talk about the individual classes in a second, but another thing that's really important to me under this format is we've added an eighth class. So historically, students in our high school took 7 classes. And that meant a couple of things. First, what's so remarkable about Landmark is all the offerings that we have, from woodworking to auto shop to dance to performance to music to marine biology, all these things. But you only got 7 classes, right? So you were very limited on what you could actually take during your tenure at Landmark. And also, what would happen is if when we had a student that came to us at the high school who had some really compromised literacy skills, they hadn't received any support, they're coming to us for the first time as a ninth or 10th grader, one of the beautiful things about our schedule is that we custom design it for every single kid. So we were able to create additional literacy support for that kid, but it came at the cost of something because we only had 7 classes. And often that cost was a content class that we would eventually get to, right? But by taking a kid who's probably already behind in content because of their reading abilities and saying that we ultimately want to make you the best science reader possible, we have to teach you science. We have to put you in front of grade level science text with the right support, right, in the right methodology and all those things. But we were limited to do that, right, because of our schedule. So we were super excited about being able to add that 8th class. What you'll also see here is that we also now have a daily advisory. Many of you might be familiar at Landmark. We have historically had academic advisors, which was a program where we had somebody who was overseeing a student's schedule and was kind of the expert on that individual, which was wonderful. And by design, it was often our most seasoned and our most accomplished teachers. But it also meant they spent the least amount of time in the classroom because of that particular role. And instead, what we wanted to do is say, how do we get those people, right, who epitomize what it means to do the Landmark Learning Model, spending time in front of our kids? And so in introducing the advisory program, which again, many of you are familiar with, it's very common at many independent and public schools, LD or otherwise, our students now meet with their advisor every single day. So we no longer intervene when there's a problem, or we're not responsive in terms we got an email from mom or dad, let's find Johnny and find out what's going on. We meet with Johnny every single day in a small group, and we have a curriculum that we develop specifically around executive functioning, around goal setting. So Monday we set our week, we talk about what's this need to look like, what are our goals? Let's look at our calendar, let's look at our sports schedule, how are we going to get Tuesday's homework done if we have a game that night, so on and so forth. And then every day throughout the week, right, we have a structured check-in that we do this. A little funny story that I think you'll appreciate. Again, spent a lot of time on this. We launched it. It's going great. Our seniors, God bless them, very quickly realized I'm doing the same thing as a freshman, right? And I'm a senior. So we quickly, took that feedback and pivoted a little bit to say, okay, how do we treat seniors? Sorry, go back to that. How do we treat seniors a little bit differently, or even juniors? And now we're having conversations about maybe that's a time where a senior knows where I'm available. They know what they can come to me for, and they need to make a choice, right? They need to make a choice about how they spend that time, because that's what life's going to look like. What you also see at the end of the day, we've also introduced office hours. So at the end of the day, I believe 3 days a week, our teachers are all available for our kids. And they've always been available, but now it's a little bit more structured. And again, the idea is, Mr. Smith is available on Tuesdays at 3. I'm going to check in with you in advisory on Monday. We're going to make a plan. And then on Wednesday, I want to hear how it went with Mr. Smith, because you were telling me you didn't understand the assignment, that kind of thing. So again, giving kids opportunities to navigate with high levels of support, right, that we can then lower that safety net over time. Looking specifically at Julia's schedule here, what you'll see is she still has her language arts tutorial. So she's still, all of our students every single day continue to meet one-on-one or in very small groups, specifically looking at skill building as it relates to literacy. Obviously, Julia's looks very different than it did when she first got to Landmark, and probably different than a senior that might have only been with us for 2 years. And then she also has a language arts class where we're working on writing. We're working to reinforce whatever she's doing in tutorial, right? Again, getting more into novel study and other things that are appropriate for her as a senior. Because of that eighth class, right, she's now able to take printmaking and painting because she loves it. It's a passion of hers. She's also in Calculus 1, and this is one of the things I think is super important. With Calculus 1, we probably have four-ish sections of Calculus 1 this year. And Julia is in Calculus 1 that's built for Julia, right? She couldn't be in the third period Calculus 1 because that's a different group of students that we design the schedule around based on their learning profile, processing speeds, other things like that. So it's not just that we are able, I mean, there's always been Landmark. So it's not just that we're able to give students a breadth of classes, right? And not only do we have really highly trained teachers, we design every single class so that we're maximizing learning profile, so that Julia is taking calculus at a rate that makes sense for Julia and her peers. That could be different, again, from the student that's across the street. Very quickly, Liam came to us as a senior. I'm sorry, Liam came to us as a freshman, right? So Liam also, again, very similar schedule. Liam's in pre-engineering because he's really interested. He really likes math. He's really interested in pursuing that. He's also in an integrated math. So one of the things that Liam wanted to do in our integrated math, he's taking more of a math for real life because that's something that he was super interested in. So think more about finance. Think more about how do I use math on a daily basis? How do I use math to navigate the real world, which is something he was super interested in. He's in auto mechanics. He also has his tutorial, again, which is going to look different than Julia's by design. He also gets to take guitar. Both of them share an introduction to the American legal system, right? A super popular class that we have. So again, just to show you kind of the breadth of experiences and opportunities that our students have. What we also have, a lot of our students, a lot of our this year juniors and seniors are enrolled in our not even new anymore. I think we're in year 3 of our partnership with Endicott College. If you didn't know, Landmark literally shares a property line with Endicott College. It's right next to us. We have a wonderful relationship, and through that, we are able to have a dual enrollment program where, again, I think we have 17-ish juniors and seniors this year who are taking a class at Landmark taught by an Endicott professor for which they get Endicott credit for. They'll have 3 hours of credit for that class alone over the course of the first semester. It meets 2 days a week. In the days that it's not meeting, they have a structured study hall where they have an experienced Landmark staff member who's just there to help answer questions, to not to do for, but to make sure we're on track for, if you will, right? So recognizing that we want to give them a taste of college. What might this look like? I always say to the kids, if you hate this, I like that. I love you learning that as much as if you love it. Because if you find, I don't want to do this 2 days a week, the demands, the reading, it's not for me, awesome. Let's know that now before we make a commitment, right? That's going to have a lot of financial and long-term consequences. Let's find out. To be honest, we haven't had a kid yet that hadn't liked it. They've all been into it. They really enjoy it. We also have some students, for a variety of maybe scheduling reasons or other conflicts, that instead are participating in Endicott's Van Loan program, which is a night classes. So they've given us special consideration. We're the only school that I'm aware of, high school, where they allow our students to take night classes at Endicott. It's about a 7-week intensive where, again, they earn 3 credit hours. We have juniors and seniors that have been doing that. We actually have a couple sophomores that we might actually encourage to enroll in that program this year. Again, great program. The dual enrollment we cover all the costs of. I think maybe maybe a $50 processing fee, but otherwise we cover all of it. Van Loan program, our families cover the cost of, but at a highly reduced rate. And again, what I love about the Van Loan program, last year a bunch of kids took like the history of the Salem witch trials, and there was like modern terrorism or things like that. So it's a high interest opportunity for some of our kids to experience college, right? And they all get a college ID from Endicott, which they just think is so cool. It's great. Another thing that we introduced last year that Liam and Julia, as I just mentioned, part of their senior year and part of their senior seminar course, which I should have highlighted, are already working towards, is this idea of a senior capstone. So last year we introduced for every single senior, they spent the last 3 weeks of their high school career in an internship. 99% were off campus. We had a couple kiddos. We had one that interned at our faculty hotspot at our faculty daycare. We had one kiddo who was going to RISD, and he did an art portfolio that culminated in a piece of art that we now have in our new student center. But vast majority were all over the state of Massachusetts, right? So as you can see here, we had vet techs. We had a student that worked for the shoe company Hey Dude, because we have an alum that is there. We had filmmakers. You see the young man working on the soundboard. He worked with a sound studio out of Gloucester. What I love about it, when I asked him, how did you get that? He said, I just started emailing different studios, and they were the one that replied. And I was like, that's awesome, buddy. That's literally how life works, right? So in order to do this, not only did they have this culminating experience, they built a resume. They had to solicit. They had to follow up. They had to do all the things that it requires in life, right, to get a job or just make a connection and build a network. It was interesting, right? So we did this every single senior, 3 weeks. Every single senior completed it. We didn't have nobody got fired. Nobody had any problems. It was really remarkable. And it culminated with everybody coming back, and we did kind of like a science fair where everybody did a presentation about their different internship, and we invited families, and everybody, went around. And what was remarkable is that some of the kids that we were most worried about, some of the kids that we found kind of executive functioning skills in the classroom, motivation, all those things, we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be interesting. And those were some of the kids that had the best experience. One particular child who'd been with us for 4 years, great kid. School was not his thing. School was never his thing, right? And it was a little bit of kind of dragging him across the finish line. He interned at an oyster farm. And unsolicited, we got an email from the director of the oyster farm just telling us how much they were impressed by and appreciated this kiddo. He was there early. He stayed late. Not only did he actually work are they fields? What do you do? However you get an oyster, right? Wearing the boots. But then he also wanted to learn more about the business itself and all of these things. Really cool experience that we're continuing this year. Because one of the things that we talk a lot about that I've always found odd about school is that K through 12 school ends the same way it began, right? It never makes sense to me that we're going to prepare kids to go out and launch into the world in a way that looks exactly as they ended their ninth grade year, right? So we're really proud and excited about this. And again, this is inquiry based at its core, right? How do we give these kids experiences? How do we get them to manage their own calendars? How do we make sure that they understand that they need to respond to email and all of these things? So also, we had, I'm sorry, I didn't know we did this individually. We've launched kids throughout time to a number of amazing universities. All of our kids go through our college counseling program. Again, 100% are accepted. 94% choose to enroll. We also celebrate and are thrilled for the 6% who don't, right? If college isn't your thing right now, let's not try to make it. Let's figure out what is your thing, right? From military service to going into the trades, whatever it may be. I spoke with a young lady last year who was a senior, and she did her internship with Habitat for Humanity because she wanted to be a plumber, and she interned with Habitat Humanity's plumber, and now she's plumbing, and it's great. Right? She's probably gonna make more than I do in 2 years, right? It's remarkable. But again, we also have kids that go on some really great universities. There was a picture earlier of Harry, as part of his capstone, he worked with a state legislator and interned with them. And this year he started at NYU. I actually got to go see him a couple of weeks ago when I was in New York and met at Washington Square Park, and that was a ton of fun. We have kids at Elon. We have kids at University of New Hampshire, Northeastern. And then we also have kids that we work with that go to Bryant, that go to Clark University, that go to schools that have very explicit and structured support programs, because that's right. That's what's right for them, right? And that's what we want, the experiences that we want to create and to offer to them. So I think I'm wrapping up, I promise. So we also have so many electives and after-school activities, from mountain biking to skiing in the winter to sailing, both competitively, and then in the off season, which is right now, it's more of a club sport. We have tech theater, we have performance theater, we have singing, we have dancing. We do at least 3 full productions a year. We have an incredible art studio where we send kids to SCAD in RISD every year. We have lacrosse, soccer, cross country, volleyball, everything you can think of. We don't have ice hockey. I'm from the South. I didn't realize how big of a deal it was, but we have a lot of kids that will still, if they live nearby, will enroll in their ice hockey programs at their home schools. Our sports programs, we have golf, for the most part, are non-cut. We'll do everything we can to create as many JV teams as possible, right? We have a varsity team that is our competitive teams, and then we do everything we can to create multiple JV teams because we want kids to participate. Often our kids don't have that opportunity. Often our kids, before they got here, that was a level of vulnerability they weren't willing to take a risk on, understandably. So we want to give them that opportunity. One of the rare exceptions is golf because we just don't have enough tee time. So we have 11 golfers, and that is one of the few that we have to cut because we just don't have the space for. My son is a sophomore. He spends every single day after school in the tech theater department building sets, which I don't know where he gets from at all because I don't know how to use a hammer. But he loves it, right? It's what he does. And then living at Landmark, right? As I mentioned, we have a thriving residential program. And one of the things that's unique about it, I call it future-proof living. We don't just have a boarding program, we have a curriculum around student life. So we have explicit executive function curriculum built into before and after school for our residential students. So it's not just that they live here, we partner with them again to try to help them scaffold how can I manage my free time, right? How do I make decisions about when I do homework and when I can play on my Xbox, right? And you might be familiar, we have kind of a series of levels that kids graduate through based on the choices that they make, right? Where they're able to gain more privileges as they exhibit choices, right? That reflect the kinds of things that we want to see. I call it future-proof living because it's the exact things that our kids need when they leave Landmark, right? These kids aren't the kids that get to high school and don't know how to make their bed or do their laundry, right? Or even get themselves up, right? That's all part of this. To the point of when you first get here, right? We'll have a 6:45 wake up call, and then as students show that they don't need it, we don't do it anymore, right? Because they're doing it themselves, and it's that level of scaffolding and individuality that we put there. All right, last, I just wanted to highlight a couple of our graduates, just so you're aware. Again, going back to our portrait of a graduate, self-aware self-advocates. Morgan Sebastian graduated from Endicott College last year. As part of that, she actually published a book about what it means to be dyslexic and kind of how do you become more self-aware and support yourself in that. It's really great, super impressive. We also have Ethan. Ethan just in the spring graduated from George Washington University. I actually talked to Ethan last night. Ethan he was involved in every single club and political action group at George Washington. I tried to actually get his LinkedIn, and I couldn't even I didn't even know half the stuff he was involved in. But you meet Ethan. When I met Ethan a couple years ago, he was visiting from George Washington in his full suit and trench coat because that's just how Ethan exists in the world, right? Because Ethan's going to run the world one day. But again, just graduated. Talked to him last night. If anybody needs a political consultant or looking for anything in that, Ethan is looking for a role. Tyler graduated many years ago. Tyler is probably my age, I think. Apologies to Tyler if he's not. But I find this remarkable. Tyler is vice president of systems at Pixar, right? So Tyler's son attended Landmark for a period of time. He graduated from Landmark, and what I love about Tyler, first of all, he let me tour Pixar, and I'm a Disney nut, so it was like a dream come true for me. But he's vice president of systems means you're in charge of technology. He didn't have a technology background. He's like, I didn't know anything about technology, but I understood systems, I understood problem solving, and I understood people, right? Which is the exact kind of like that's the epitome of that dyslexic thinking that we want to get to. And then Sam. Sam was on our board. He also graduated from Landmark. He's probably 10 or 15 years younger than I am. Sam is currently an international affairs fellow on the Council of Foreign Relations. Again, I don't even know what that means, but I know it's important. First time I met Sam, he was working for the UN. He was in charge of humanitarian response. for the UN. First time we were supposed to meet, I was waiting. He never showed up to our Zoom, and it was the day that Russia invaded the Ukraine. And so obviously he had a reason, but that was the level of work that Sam was doing. And again, it's I think these kind of stories that are so powerful that show not only the rigor and the academics that our students have and are prepared for, but those soft skills that often also epitomize who they are and what they do. So I talked way longer than I was supposed to, but I think Lisa has rejoined us, and there's probably some questions. So I'll turn it over, and Lisa, I'm happy to answer anything, and certainly also you take whatever is appropriate for you.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So there were a couple questions in the chat. Thank you for those who submitted questions. The first one is what percentage of students are sent private pay versus getting public school funding?
Oh, so the percentage varies year to year. It's still about a 50-50 split. About 50% of our students receive public funding, and about 50% of our students are privately funded. And for all of our privately funded students, we do have financial aid available. So there's a good portion of those students who also are with us through financial aid.
Great. Thanks, Josh. And we use Clarity for our financial aid platform. And there's a section on our website with all of our timelines. But if you have specific questions about that, I'm happy to walk you through those. The next question is how much time is dedicated for each student for one-on-one as opposed to small group tutorial?
Yeah, so it's going to look a little bit different at EMS, but over the course of 2 days, every student will have 70 minutes. 99% of students right now have 70 minutes at EMS, our elementary middle school, of one-to-one tutorial, and then 3 other literacy classes that they have. And then at our high school, they have an 80-minute tutorial every other day, and then they can have up to 2 or 3 additional literacy courses if they need it. That's where in the high school it becomes a little bit more customized depending on where they are with their skills.
Great. Josh, do you want to stop sharing your screen so we can maybe
Yeah, I'm
see
sorry.
it that way? That's okay. So everyone, there were no more questions in the chat, but I just wanted to give an opportunity. I know we're almost at 1 o'clock, but just wanted to see if there are any other questions. Feel free to unmute and chime in. Yeah, Ellie?
I would like to know, Ellie Hickey, I'm an advocate and have been placing students at Landmark for years. I'd like to know how you identify students that have not closed the gap or made effective progress as seniors and how that's addressed if they've been enrolled at Landmark for a while.
Sure. So one of the things that we did this year is we have built out a new department called the Student Progress and Performance. And part of that is to centralize student data so that we have one department that is looking at student data across the board. We also built out a custom dashboard so that we could look at individual student data individually, but also in aggregate, right? So looking at current and historical data, because we've always had tons of data, but it's not been something that's easy to necessarily visualize and look at. In terms of a senior, right, what we'll do is we will, with all students, we'll try to work with a family to understand what's your goals? What is it that you want to accomplish? What is it that what life looks like after senior year? And then how do we build a schedule that's best going to prepare you for that? Across the board, vast majority of our students make the progress that we would expect. As with anywhere in any dyslexic kid, there can be holes, right? Sometimes we have kids that, despite looking at their profile on paper, right, we're like, wow, it's a real head scratcher why they have not responded in the way that we'd expect them to respond. So then we might change teachers, we might change some programmatic emphasis. Again, we might change the emphasis of the tutorial, right? Tutorial is not just about decoding, especially for kids that have mastered decoding. So it's kind of a combination of things. But especially for our older students, we also try to think about, okay, what is it that you want after Landmark? And what's the best way to make sure that we prepare you as much as possible for that?
And if it's okay, just one more, who's in charge of all the amended IEPs? If an IEP has not been amended and services have been changed, but the student's family has not reviewed the IEP and have not signed off on it. And then one final question, would it ever be appropriate for a student from Landmark only to have 3 years of math?
For the IEPs, that now is within our Department of Student Progress and Performance. When we made the changes to the IEPs as we went into this year, we did amend and did everything we could to send them out as appropriately. And I believe 98% have signed off as we sit here today. In terms of 3 years of math, I think it would depend on graduation requirements. It depend on the student. It depend on kind of a variety of things. Right now, I know, I believe all of our, and I actually don't even want to quote me because I don't know if we have seniors who may not be in a math program right now. But we do work under, for all of our students, we work under graduation requirements for the state of Massachusetts and make sure that we meet those.
Great. Thanks, Josh. There was just, I know we're almost at time, but there are just 2 more questions. What is the Landmark approach to handwriting and note-taking?
Great questions. So in our elementary, middle school, we explicitly teach handwriting. We still explicitly teach cursive, right, which is shockingly controversial at times. We don't teach cursive because we think, you know, we're super concerned about penmanship. We teach cursive because of all the research that underpins being able to help kids make that sound symbol association, right, through explicit instruction in cursive. When students get to high school, if they are still struggling with penmanship, we will likely not spend quite as much time on explicit handwriting, only because there's, you know, we have to make more calculations about the time that we have with them. And then in terms of note taking, we have a variety of strategies. The 2-column notes is kind of classic Landmark. It's been classic Landmark for a really, really long time. We continue to explicitly teach that, right, where we have that tool. And again, what we want to be able to do, what we want to give kids opportunities is not only explicitly teach them how to use that tool, but then we also want to explicitly give them opportunities to independently use it, right? Are you using that handwriting, or I'm sorry, are you using that note-taking tool to solve this particular problem? Because that's ultimately what we want.
Great. And then just if we have time for one more question, especially for kids in younger grades, daily routine is literacy skills is so important. How can that happen?
So for all of our elementary, middle school kids, all of our kids spend just over 50% of their time every single day in direct literacy instruction. So we have a one-to-one tutorial, we have a literature class, we have a language arts class, and we have a communications class. Actually, we added an additional course this year in our elementary middle school program. We only had 3 last year. This year we have 4 that are explicitly directed at instruction. I'm sorry, at literacy instruction. So our kids are spending right at just over 50% of their instructional time in literacy every single day. And again, being reinforced, right? So every teacher is trained in the same methodology, and so that we're constantly cycling back to those same things. And as we all know too, reading's super complex, right? We need to make sure that we are getting kids exposed to decoding, but also getting kids connected to reading text in a connected text, right? So a single word, a phrase, a sentence, a paragraph, right? How are we explicitly teaching comprehension? By building up not only background knowledges, but strategies around that. And also our communications class is what we previously would have called oral expression in elementary and middle school. And again, that's this idea of building actual language, expressive language with our kids. Because in order to be a competent reader and a competent comprehender, you also have to have really strong expressive language skills. And so we were able to explicitly add that this year too, in addition to a literature class where they're being exposed to grade level text through novel study and things like that. And then our language arts class where they're doing a reading and writing connection, right? Then again, is then reinforced in a one-to-one tutorial at that level.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. I know we're upon or a little after 1, so thank you for your patience. This was recorded, so we'll make sure that this is sent out to you all. And also anyone in your firm or didn't get to join us today or didn't register, please feel free to pass that along to them as well. And if you have any additional questions we didn't cover today, please feel free to reach out to Josh or me, and we're happy to go into more detail for you. Again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a great day.